I wasn't supposed to work that day. I'd swapped shifts with Kenji because he had tickets to some concert in Tokyo, and I figured, why not? Mom had been pestering me to take more days off anyway. "You're not your father," she'd say. "You don't have to die at that plant." It always strung when she said it like that, not because she was wrong, but because she was. My dad died in that same reactor building 10 years ago. A freak accident, they called it. A misread pressure valve, a few wrong decisions, and a split-second delay. It cost him his life. I was 15. I still remember standing in the kitchen, barefoot, holding a piece of toast when the call came. Mom dropped the phone and didn't move for a full minute. Anyway, that's not where the story starts. It starts last Thursday. The morning was normal in the way dangerous days always are. You don't wake up to ominous music or dramatic lighting. You wake up to a cat meowing because you're late feeding her. You burn your toast. You forget your badge on the dresser. You roll your eyes at the same old safety posters in the break room. I remember joking with Now about the coffee tasting like melted plastic. He laughed and said it was an improvement. At 2:16 p.m., the ground began to hum. Not shake, not tremble. It hummed like something alive under our feet had taken a deep breath. We looked at each other, confused, heads tilted, like dogs hearing a distant whistle. Then everything happened at once. The lights flickered, the ground jumped, not rolled, jumped. I hit the floor before I even realized what was going on. Sirens, screams, metal shrieking, a high-pitched alarm that drilled right into the base of my skull. I've never known fear like that. It's not the fear you get when you almost crash your car or when you hear a noise in the dark. This was primal, cellular, like my bones were trying to crawl out of my skin. We trained for this. Every month we ran drills, emergency protocols, evac routes. I could recite half of them in my sleep. But when the world turns liquid and the walls around you start cracking like eggshells, drills don't mean shit. I crawled to the nearest intercom, hands bleeding from broken glass, and screamed something, I don't even know what. Orders, warnings, names. The noise was unreal. People were everywhere trying to follow protocol, trying to act like they weren't panicking. But you couldn't not panic. Not when the floor buckled beneath your knees and pieces of the ceiling were coming down like goddamn meteors. I remember thinking, where's Mom? She was home, just a few miles away, and the last thing I said to her that morning was, yeah, I'll get milk. I couldn't get to my phone, there was no signal. Half the monitors were dead, the other half were flashing numbers that made my stomach twist. I saw Tanaka, one of the older techs, trying to manually override something on panel 4. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely press the buttons. He looked up at me, eyes wide, and shouted something I didn't catch. Then the power surged and something behind us exploded. I swear I heard my dad's name echo in my head right then, like he was there. Like the ghost of him was walking those same corridors, watching me run where he couldn't. It lasted forever. But in reality, it was maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes of hell. 3 minutes that snapped the world in half. When the worst of it stopped, we staggered to the exits, or where we thought the exits were. One of the main corridors had collapsed. There was dust everywhere, and you couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. My ears were ringing. My legs didn't feel like my own. And people were crying, not just from pain, from fear, from not knowing if their families were safe, if they'd ever get out, if this was just the beginning. And it was. We lost main power in under a minute. The backup generators kicked in barely, and only for the critical systems. But even then, the damage was everywhere. I limped down to control sub 2 with Now and this junior tech named Kaz. His hands were still shaking. I think he'd never even been through a real emergency drill, not like this. He kept asking if it was over. I didn't have the heart to tell him that this was probably just the beginning. The control room was chaos. Monitors blinking, red lights strobing like some awful rave, people shouting numbers and codes over each other. One of the coolant lines had ruptured, not a full breach, but enough to spike the pressure and send half the gauges into warning zones. We had protocol for this: emergency shutdown, isolation, tertiary containment. I knew the steps, had done them in drills a dozen times, but drills don't prepare you for blood on your hands and dust in your lungs. I slid into the operator's seat at Station 3 and started flipping switches, calling out readings. Someone else shouted for containment on Sector B. The temperature was rising, not fast, but steadily. Too steadily. Every fiber of my body wanted to run, to leave, to scream and bolt out of that crumbling building and find my mother. But I kept seeing my father's face, not how he looked in pictures, but how he looked the night before he died. Tired, quiet, like he knew something I didn't. He once told me, real courage isn't about running into fire, it's about staying when your knees tell you to run. So I stayed. Kaz dropped a toolkit. Metal clanged against the floor. He muttered sorry in this broken, high-pitched whisper. I told him to breathe. You're doing fine, kid, just breathe. The emergency coolant loop came back online at 2:47 p.m. The pressure dipped just below critical. For a moment, a brief, blessed moment, the alarm stopped. We all just stood there frozen. Nobody wanted to say it, not out loud, but we knew we'd bought time. How much, no clue. Could have been hours, could have been minutes, but the system wasn't going to explode today, not on our watch. I looked around at everyone in that room, sweat-soaked, ash-covered, terrified. And then I said it, I have to go. Nobody stopped me, now just nodded. His face was unreadable. I grabbed my phone, still no service, and a flashlight from the wall cabinet. My ID badge was cracked. My boots were caked in grime. My jacket had a rip across the back from where something grazed me during the first shockwave. I didn't care. My mom was alone. Our house wasn't far, maybe a 30-minute walk under normal circumstances, but nothing was normal now. I left through the service corridor behind the maintenance wing. Parts of the ceiling had collapsed. Water was dripping from a burst pipe. The hallway smelled like rust and oil and something burnt. I heard distant sirens, dozens of them, coming from every direction. Outside, the world looked broken. Buildings that had stood for decades were twisted like crumpled paper. Power lines dangled like vines. Smoke curled up from what looked like a collapsed parking structure. The air was full of dust and this awful dry silence, the kind that makes your ears ring just from the absence of noise. I stood there for just a second trying to remember the path home. Streets I'd walked 100 times looked alien. Cars were flipped. Pavement was cracked open like a fault line had torn through the soul of the city. And then I ran. I don't remember making the decision. My legs just moved. I didn't feel the cuts on my hands or the ache in my knee or the sting of the smoke in my lungs. I just ran. The streets were unrecognizable. I turned onto what used to be Hinmachi Avenue and almost tripped over an upturned vending machine. A cat darted out from under it, hissed, and vanished down a broken gutter. Windows had burst from the pressure, and shards of glass crunched under my boots with every step. I was maybe 10 minutes from the old bookstore, the one Mom used to take me to on Sundays. If I could get there, I could cut through the alley behind it and be 2 blocks from home. But the buildings were a mess. I couldn't tell which ones were still standing and which ones were just waiting to fall. I slowed down near the corner and heard something crying. High-pitched, a child. I turned my flashlight and caught the reflection of a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, crouched beside a toppled signpost. Her hands were covering her ears. Her knees were scraped and bleeding. I hesitated. My mind screamed, keep going. Every second mattered, but my feet walked toward her. Hey, I said gently, kneeling down, trying not to sound as terrified as I felt. Are you okay? She didn't answer, just stared at me wide-eyed, trembling. My name's Taro, I said, slipping into the softest Japanese I could muster. Are you alone? She nodded, barely. I glanced around. No one, just cracked concrete and the smell of something electrical burning. I pulled a small packet of tissues from my jacket and offered it to her. You hurt? Another nod, still no words. I looked at my watch. You don't have time. You don't have time. But what was I going to do, just leave her there? I scooped her up. She was light, shockingly light. There's a relief center near the river, I told myself, more than her. They'll be setting something up. We walked 3 blocks, more like stumbled, until I saw the orange emergency tarp. A few police officers, a volunteer nurse, and a guy handing out bottled water. I handed the girl over, gave them my name, asked them to call her parents if the lines came back up. She didn't say a word, I added, but she held my hand the whole time. I didn't wait for thanks, I just turned and ran again. By the time I reached the bookstore, the sun was dipping, and everything was tinted gold, a surreal contrast to the hell around me. I remembered that alley, how it used to smell like warm bread from the bakery next door. Now it smelled like smoke and rot. Halfway through the alley, I stopped dead. Our house, I could see it from the end. Or what was left of it. The roof had partially caved in. One of the walls was completely gone, like something had scooped it out with a giant claw. The front gate, the one my mom had painted sky blue and repainted every spring, hung sideways on a single hinge. I broke into a sprint. Mom! I slipped on the gravel and hit the ground hard. My palm split open on a rock, but I didn't feel it. Just scrambled up and ran the last few feet. The door was jammed. I kicked it once, twice, the third time it gave way. Inside was dark, dust hung in the air like mist. The hallway was half blocked by a fallen beam, but I could squeeze through. The kitchen was empty, plates shattered. A photo of my parents on the wall had fallen and cracked in 2, my dad's side covered in dirt. I called again, Mom, nothing. I moved into the back room, coughing from the dust. Then I saw it. Her phone, lying on the floor, screen shattered, but it was hers. The cherry blossom sticker on the back gave it away, and next to it, her shoes, the ones she always left at the back door. I dropped to my knees, my whole body started shaking. Was she gone? Had I come all this way just to find echoes? I heard a sound, a faint creak, from the storage closet. I spun, heart in my throat, and yanked the door open. It was empty. No, wait, a blanket, folded carefully on the floor. She'd taken shelter here, maybe during the aftershock. And then another noise, outside. I ran back through the broken hallway around the rubble to the front yard. And there in the distance, stumbling toward the house, holding a broken umbrella like a cane, was her. I ran to her. I didn't know if I was running to save her or just to hold on to her. Either way, I needed her more than I'd ever needed anyone before. "Mom," I shouted again as I reached her. Her eyes were glazed, unfocused. Her left arm hung awkwardly as though she couldn't move it properly. She looked smaller, fragile, but not weak. No, my mother was the kind of person who had strength you couldn't see, but you could feel in her touch. It was always there, even when I was a kid, when I'd scrape my knee and she'd bandage me up like a soldier preparing for battle. But now she looked like someone who had been through hell and had barely managed to crawl out. "Mom," I whispered, my voice breaking. I kneeled down beside her, reaching out to help her stand, but she winced and shook her head. "Don't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's not what you think, Taro." My heart clenched. What did she mean? "What happened?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, she looked around, taking in the devastation around us, the wreckage of the town, the ruined buildings, the smoke in the air. She didn't seem surprised by any of it, like she had already come to terms with the fact that it was all gone, that we were all just struggling to survive, one moment at a time. Her eyes finally found mine again. There was something in them I hadn't seen before, something darker. "I got hurt, Taro. I don't think I can walk." My mind raced. No, this can't be happening. She couldn't be hurt. My mom was invincible. She had always been the strong one, the one who kept everything together when it felt like everything was falling apart. But the look on her face, the way she was clutching her side, it was clear now. She was in pain, and it was bad. I helped her sit down on the curb. She leaned against the side of the house, what was left of it, and closed her eyes for a moment, as though trying to gather herself. I wanted to hold her, tell her everything would be okay, but I knew it wouldn't, not right now. "Where are you hurt?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Just my side," she said softly. "I must have twisted something when I was trying to find shelter. It's deeper than I thought." I was at a loss for words. What do I do? There were no doctors, no clinics. There was no way to get help. "You're going to be fine," I said, though I didn't believe it myself. I ran my hand through my hair. The adrenaline from finding her was starting to wear off, and I could feel the weight of the situation sinking in. "We'll get you somewhere safe. We'll find help." She didn't argue, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "We can't just leave," she said softly, looking around. "Taro, there's nothing left. Not here, not anywhere." "What now?" I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my composure. "Mom, we can't give up. We have to try." Her eyes softened, but she didn't answer. I could see how badly she was struggling. The side of her face was pale. She was weak, and it hurt me to see her like this. I had always thought she was invincible, but now the harsh reality was setting in. I took out my phone, but there was no signal. No surprise there. The cell towers had probably fallen, or worse, they were completely down. There were a few makeshift emergency stations set up in nearby areas, I knew that. I'd seen some of the tents on my way here, but getting there, the way was blocked by rubble and debris. The streets were in chaos, and the roads were filled with people trying to escape. "I'm not leaving you," I said firmly, pulling her arm around my neck and helping her up. "We're going to get to one of those stations. You're going to be fine. We just need to get to help." She didn't say anything, but she leaned into me for support, the weight of her body making my knees feel like they might buckle. I can't lose her, not like this. I helped her through the rubble. Every step felt like it took a lifetime. She gasped in pain every few seconds, but she never complained. She just kept going, one foot in front of the other. We passed a group of evacuees along the way. They looked like they had been wandering for hours, or maybe days. A few people stopped and offered help, but I waved them off. There was no time to stop. I needed to get her to safety, and every second mattered. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we reached one of the emergency stations. A few makeshift tents, some medical supplies, a few volunteers huddled around, trying to organize things. I made my way to the front of the line, feeling a burst of hope surge through me. "I need help," I said urgently. "My mom's hurt, please." A nurse quickly came over, assessing her injuries. She had the look of someone who had seen it all before. She pulled out a first aid kit and began checking my mom's side. "She's going to need rest, fluids, and some painkillers," the nurse said, glancing up at me. "But it doesn't look life-threatening. She'll be okay for now, but we'll need to keep an eye on her." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Few days had passed since we found temporary shelter. Mom was recovering, though she still couldn't move much. The pain remained constant, like an unrelenting river that never gave her peace but didn't kill her either. While I tried to be her rock, everything around me felt distant, unreal. Most of the townspeople had evacuated, and only a handful of desperate souls remained, searching for help. We had no signal, no water, no food, only what we could gather from the surrounding ruins. I could have left her there in the camp with the other survivors, maybe even gone looking for a more stable place where we could start over. But deep down, I knew there was no more starting over. The world we had known was gone. Everything that had kept us safe, secure, it was all reduced to ashes. But I couldn't leave her, not now, not like this. The days blurred together. Every morning I woke up to find my mom's condition had worsened. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep properly, and the pain in her side seemed to be getting worse. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, and it terrified me. Not because I feared losing her, I had already accepted that possibility, but because I knew I couldn't let her go like this, alone, in this hell. The emergency stations were overcrowded. People were desperate. There were no doctors left to help, only volunteers doing their best to keep people alive. I tried to find a way to get us out of here, maybe to some other town that hadn't been hit so hard, but the roads were blocked and every direction led to more chaos. I needed to make a decision. That's when I saw it, the station in the distance, the one I had heard rumors about. A makeshift medical camp run by a few remaining specialists who had stayed behind. The problem was getting there. The roads were impassable. I could tell from the way the people in the camp looked at me that they were giving up hope. Their faces were hollow, their eyes full of resignation. But I couldn't let that happen, not to Mom, not now. "I'm going to find help," I said to her, my voice shaking. "I'll be back, just stay here, rest." She reached out weakly, grabbing my hand. "Taro," her voice cracked, "please be careful." I didn't have the heart to tell her I wasn't sure I'd make it back, but the truth was I didn't care. I couldn't, not with her still here, waiting for me. I left with nothing but the clothes on my back, the desperate hope that I could somehow find something, someone who could help. The world had been torn apart, but surely there was still something worth saving. The journey was harder than I could have ever imagined. The once bustling streets were nothing more than a graveyard of twisted metal, shattered glass, and broken buildings. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground trembled beneath my feet, as if the earth itself was mourning what had been lost. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Every step felt like it took a lifetime. I climbed over rubble, dodged falling debris, and pushed forward through the endless wasteland that had once been a city. With every passing moment, I felt more and more like I was walking through a ghost town. No one left, nothing to hold on to except the faint glimmer of a memory. Then, just when I thought I couldn't go any further, I found it, the makeshift station, buried beneath a collapsed building. It was smaller than I had imagined, but there were people there. I was barely able to breathe as I collapsed into the makeshift medical station. The air felt thick, and my chest was tight from running, from fear, from the crushing weight of everything that had happened. I looked up, and there they were, doctors and volunteers rushing to my side, their hands moving quickly as they checked my vitals, trying to assess my condition. But I didn't care about myself, not anymore. "My mother, she's at the camp, she's hurt, she needs help, please." The words came out in a rush, desperate, and the team's expressions shifted from routine concern to genuine urgency. They didn't ask questions, they just started preparing, moving toward the exit. I barely noticed the steps, the frantic rush to prepare a team for the journey back. All I could think of was her, Mom, lying there waiting for me, as fragile as the world itself. Somehow we made it back. The journey seemed like a lifetime, but when I saw the camp's makeshift tents in the distance, my heart leapt. I could already hear the distant cries of the injured, the murmur of desperate voices. Every step brought me closer to her. When I reached the tent, I found her exactly where I had left her, lying on a cot under a blanket, her eyes closed. The moment I saw her, a cold shiver ran down my spine. "Please don't be gone. Please just be alive." I rushed to her side, but the pain in her face was so real, so raw. Her breaths were shallow, and her body felt colder than before. I gripped her hand, pressing it against my chest as tears welled up in my eyes. "Mom, I'm here. I'm sorry it took so long, I'm so sorry." She opened her eyes just enough to see me, and her lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "Taro, you're here." Her voice was weak, but it was enough. The doctors worked quickly, their hands moving in practiced precision, but I couldn't focus on them. My world was just her, just this moment. Everything else had faded away. Time seemed to stand still. I watched as they did everything they could, but the truth was, I had no idea how much longer we had. Her body was frail, her condition deteriorating. But in that moment, I realized something that I hadn't allowed myself to accept before. It didn't matter. I had given everything, and I had done everything I could. "Please don't leave me, Mom," I whispered, my voice breaking. She squeezed my hand, and for a moment I thought I felt the strength of her old self. "You're strong," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You'll make it through. This is just the beginning, Taro." Tears fell freely as I held her hand, unwilling to let go, unwilling to face the possibility that this could be our last moment together. But in her eyes I saw something else, a calm acceptance. She had always been the stronger one between us, and now, even in the face of everything we had lost, she was still trying to give me something to hold on to. And as I stayed there by her side, I knew, no matter what came next, I wouldn't be alone. I had survived this far, and I would continue, carrying her memory, her love, her strength with me. It wasn't the end, not truly. It was just the beginning of something new. The world was broken, but we were.